Hello, fellow seekers. Welcome back to the Law of One Spiritual Advice Podcast. My name is El, and I am back to read some Law of One material, and I'll share with you my reflections and perceptions on that material. So today I have some quotes around gardening. It is that time of the year. It's springtime, depending where you live, I suppose. I'm over in Canada on the west coast. So it's still winter in a lot of places, but it's starting to feel like springtime here. So I thought we would bring you some gardening metaphors, because as I garden and as I, get ready for the season ahead, there's so many just sort of metaphorical things going on in my head that I always wanted to share, and I'm going to take the opportunity to do that today. And first, we will start with the quote from Ra and the Law of One material, and this is, you can find links to this at theoneinfinitecreator.com, and I have links to the LL Research material, who provides us all of this for free. So today's quote is from session 95.11, and Ra answers. There is much of blessing in the gardening and the care of surroundings, for when this is accomplished in love of the creation, the second density flowers, plants, and small animals are aware of this service and return it. End of quote. Okay, so just real simple, and what I'm going to talk about today isn't even necessarily regarding all of that quote, but I just wanted somewhere to sort of jump off on, and this is sort of the one area where they mention gardening, which, I guess I could talk about that too, is that in the Law of One, they actually talk about harvest a lot, and I know that people get weirded out with that term because, it's in terms of like animals and stuff, you harvest an animal, right? But I think the reason why they use that word harvest, in terms they kind of use it for like ascension or graduation, they use the term harvest. I think that's just because it is the most sort of accurate, language that they can use, which just most accurately describes sort of the nature of the universe. I mean, I would sort of see, maybe the nature of the universe is like this, the space is the soil, right? The infinite darkness, the infinite potential, the mud and muck, and then within that, grows the garden, which the garden of creation, which comes out of that soil. So as above, so below. And as I'm sitting there in my garden weeding it, it's also sort of like a meditation, which I'm doing, right? And in that, I always have a lot of weird connections. So I wrote down a few of those connections today, and I just wanted to share a few of them with you. But let's just sort of talk about this quote a little bit first. So it says, "There is much blessing in the gardening and the care of surroundings, for when this is accomplished in love of the creation, the second density flowers, plants, and small animals are aware of this service and return it." So I guess what they're saying is that, the second density is the density of plant and animal life. What differentiates them between us, third density entities? Third density entities have this sense of I, right? The sense of me, this illusion of separateness which we seem to live in. It is my understanding that second density animals don't live under the veil in that regard. They, sort of see each other as a group instead of as like a single entity. They sort of, I suppose they know their place in the universe, and they know their harmony within the music. I don't know if that kind of makes sense. It's essentially they don't have the veil. So they sort of somewhat, or I guess you could say, are not veiled from your intentions, right? It's like if an animal, a second density, even plant or animal, right, is aware that you are out there gardening with good intent in the creation and trying to essentially sort of plant love in a way, and right, you're not like going out there to probably not to point like to plant like poisonous plants that are like to do evil with, right? You're probably going out gardening to take care of your surroundings and to create food or some kind of sustenance or beauty or whatever it is, the reasons that you're doing that. And that's good intent. You're sowing good intent. The universe is aware of your good intentions, and like it says here, the second density entities are aware of your service and they will return it. How they return it, I don't know, don't really want to speculate. I will leave that up to the infinity of the moment to have your little interactions with that second density, and yeah, let you sort of interpret where that magic may lie between them being aware of your service and returning it. So, where to begin? Well, let's just start with what sort of made me think about this. So, I have, the winter's gone by, and obviously you don't really tend to your garden in the winter, you just sort of leave it. And with that, some of the weeds that are there, start to come up in the springtime. There's some weeds, things that have just grown over the winter, right? Where maybe I wasn't taking care of the garden. I could be in there weeding it in the winter, but I'm not. But this is where we're going with this too. So I'm out there, right? I suppose what I want to say first is that the garden is sort of metaphorical for your mind. As I'm speaking about this, think of this mentally. I want, everything that I say, I want you to think of it both physically and mentally as like tending to the garden of your mind. Okay? So let's just think about this, right? I'm out there, I'm weeding the garden, I'm pulling out the weeds. Well, what am I doing? I am essentially, I suppose the unconscious mind, right? Like I said, I left the garden all winter. So it's somewhat like leaving your unconscious, not tending to your consciousness. Like, right, maybe I didn't do any meditations for a long time. I'm not really seeking, I'm not paying attention, I'm not focusing. And therefore, my brain or my garden is just filled with weeds. It's growing with weeds, right? Well, here's a couple of things. So, I need to weed the garden. So I'm tending to my shadow side. I'm tending to my unconscious. These weeds, they grow and they seem to, right, get planted and grow easy and fast. And so it's important that you tend to them in a somewhat timely manner, which is why, even though it's early spring here, I go out early to start weeding the weeds before they've grown real thick roots. Where I have to dig even deeper to get rid of that root. And also because, they're just easier to pull too. They're smaller plants. Right, there's all these reasons why I would go out ahead of time before that shadow, those unconscious weeds, have their opportunity to somewhat take up all the space of the garden. Okay. So what do? Right? I weed it, and then what am I going to do at that point? Well, I'm going to plant some seeds. So how do we see that? Well, I am now, instead of just allowing the like whatever to grow, right? I'm not just leaving it and letting the unconscious just take over somewhat. Now I'm sitting there and I'm going to be intentfully planting seeds. So physically, right, I'm planting seeds to have food so I can grow vegetables. Somewhat I'm planting seeds for the beauty of it. I'm somewhat planting the seeds for the experience of the garden and the growing and the being connected. And I'm planting them so that I can have more seeds for next year too. So and also, with planting gardens, I'm sure if you're aware, they're very abundant actually, and so I also really enjoy the sharing of the bounty of the garden with others. So I'm planting seeds of intent. Okay, so even after I've planted the seeds, what will happen is that, well, a couple of things, right? I can plant my seeds in an empty garden, and that would be, I want you to think of this in terms of focus mentally. Okay, I plant the seeds in the empty garden. Well, I have to still give them love and attention, right? I have to make sure they have sun. I have to make sure they get watered. Maybe I have to make sure they're covered if there's some frost coming in. I have to be attentive to them. If I am not, all those sort of aspects can come and ruin the seed and its potential future growth or its potential sprouting at all. And then another thing which would happen is that if I'm not out there tending to it, at the same time, there are still weeds and seeds around, and they see this nice, seemingly empty, open garden, and so they go in and they try to plant themselves around and on top. And so with that, right, more weeds can come in, and I've done this before because, you kind of get like a lot of energy, you get out there, you weed your garden and you plant everything, and then you're doing the easy part of watering it, and you kind of have this like 2-3 week period where you don't really have to weed anything. But then what happens is that the weeds start to show themselves and come back, and you have to kick back into gear and actually do some work again. So what I'll find is that, maybe some years I'm getting lazy. What I'll do is unfortunately, the weeds sort of start to grow a little bit around all of the other seeds that I've planted. Well, what is that going to do, right? Like, it's going to leach from my intent, right? The unconscious shadow weeds which are growing are now going to leach from the seeds that are already there who are trying to sprout. They're going to create too much shade, right? Like, as the weed grows and it creates a plant, it's going to create shade, and it's going to stop that other seed from also growing, or at least have its full potential to absorb, the sunlight, all sorts of those things, right? So if you're just letting the weeds grow, well, I suppose what I should do is connect this to, what do you mean, right? Well, like daily meditation, for example. I even haven't been doing great with my daily meditations, but I still understand the reason why I would do such a thing, which is to have a maintained focus. So as you maintain your focus, as you do a daily meditation, you're somewhat reaffirming the reality of the metaphysical. It's really easy to get lost in the physical. We live in it. It's everywhere. It's convincing you that it's the illusion of separation. It's the only thing that's true. So it's somewhat important to, take one part of the day, or, in my experience, actually, I try to live almost all day like this. But, you had to take a part of your day and realign your focus towards, yes, the metaphysical is true. The seeds of intent that I plant and that I wish to grow, I believe those to be true and worthy of growing. I think and act as if those seeds were worth planting and worth paying attention to and worth keeping focus on. And why would I do such a thing? Well, it's just like tending to the plants in your garden, right? You have those seeds of intent that you've planted, you water them. As they come up, you weed things around them. You're essentially reaffirming your focus as to, yes, I don't just want to let the unconscious shadow stuff crowd over my good intent and shadow it from blossoming into its beautiful fruit. I want to keep my focus on doing the things which I feel are right, which are somewhat planted in the metaphysical realm, which means that, there always isn't some physical thing that you're going to see right away. Let's talk about that. When you plant a seed, if you've ever planted a seed, you may notice it takes quite a long time for them to grow. It will take a week or 2 or 3 weeks for the seed to germinate. And in that time, you're just looking at a bare garden, and you're like, wow, I did all of this work, and like, for what, right? You're just looking at this bare garden. So remember how we talk about freely give, freely receive, having, not like great expectations. This is somewhat related to that, although I would put it more on patience, but you'll find that you're human and you'll be like, man, I did all this somewhat for nothing, because it takes a long time, it seems, for the fruit of your labor to show. So, you plant these seeds and it just seems like, wow, okay, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, okay. Finally, you get these little sprouts, this tiny, tiny little plant, and you're like, wow, oh man, I still gotta focus on these. Wow, okay, they're just little baby plants. They're tender. They actually need even more care at this point. I need to make sure they don't spend too much time in the sun, right? Too much time in the sun is gonna kill the plant. Need to make sure that they, have some water and things of this nature. So even at this point, they're not giving you fruit. They're barely even looking like a plant. And you're thinking to yourself like, oh, yikes, this is, I spent some money and I don't know, like on gardening stuff or some soil or whatever. And you're like, did I just spend like $30 and 24 hours of work, for like to get like a couple of tomatoes? Well, or just to get like these little sprouts, right? It seems like, what was the point of all of this? So anyways, you keep going, right? You obviously understand that these things are true, meaning like your intent is true, and you know that it's going to blossom into some sort of plant, which will likely give fruit. So you keep on keeping on. And what do you know, right? It's actually great, like the way that it's so related to life, and that there's this slow growth of your intent and those baby sprouts that you've planted, and then they grow into, baby plants, and then they grow into a medium plant, and all of a sudden, like, it's almost like the growing took a really long time. It took like a month or two to go from seed to something that was like 4 centimeters or 4 inches high, right? And then from that point, it just takes off. It's almost like, okay, now the plant has enough like area in its roots and in its leaves to now gobble up all that sun and that the nutrients from the soil. And now all of a sudden, this intent and this that this intent, this plant that you've grown grows exponentially. It's real slow growth at first, but once it's there and planted and firm, boom, takes off. And I can't, I just want you to think of that mentally and physically, and, even in terms of you planting things and they manifest, they're going to manifest like that. It's slow, slow, slow build at first, but you keep on. You need that focus and that intent to be aligned. And as you keep it in alignment, the weeds don't, grow over it too much, and then boom, it takes off. So that is a really good metaphor for that part of it. Okay, so also, right, I was just saying about weeds. The more you weed and tend to your shadow work, the less crowded your mind or your garden is. It's easier to take care of the plants that are in your garden when you have gotten rid of the weeds, right? If you kind of walk into your garden and you haven't tended to it for a while, and you see it's just chaotic with plants that you've planted and weeds, it takes a lot of effort to get back in there and start weeding it again, right? So it's also like like kayaking up a river against stream. It's if you have that slow and steady pace of just going and going and going and going, you're gonna be okay, and you're going to keep moving in the direction that you want to move. But if you try to go really, really fast, what happens is you get tired, and then you have to stop, and then the current pushes you the opposite direction. All of a sudden, you're now going the opposite direction of where you want to go, and now it's going to take a lot more effort to get back going in the direction you want, because you're going to have to paddle against the stream, and then you're going to finally, somewhat be at a zero speed, and then you're gonna slowly get back to going upstream again. So I see the same metaphor when you're growing your intent in your plants in your garden. You need to keep that focus steady, and when you don't, the progress that you lose, what's going to take more effort to sort of get going on the path again, get your plants back into optimal sunlight and not getting crowded by the weeds. So that's your consistency and of attention and love is needed. And with your patience, of course. When I wrote this down, I kind of like this to mention this. I was thinking that, say you do set aside part of your day for a daily meditation, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, whatever is good for you, right? I mean, to me, that's almost like you've created a little greenhouse in your mind. You've created shelter, a place where, the weeds can't enter as easily, a place where it is more sheltered from the outside world, a place that you go within, which you are aware of, that you've intentfully made. You intentfully made that greenhouse. You intentfully made that meditation space. You intentfully go there in your mind even. You intentfully made that. You didn't just walk out into nature to try to find some plants. You made a garden, and then you created a greenhouse over it. So I don't know, I would kind of think that you doing a daily meditation is somewhat like you creating that space where, the seeds are going to way more easily grow, and your focus is going to be way more on point, which is like having, that nice, beautiful environment where the plants can grow and blossom. And now, just sort of wrapping up, we will talk about once the plants finally fruit and start to blossom. Okay, so beautiful. You've planted your garden. You maybe had a few weeds come up, but that's all right. You've taken care of those weeds, and now you have this beautiful, lush garden, and there is bounty, and there is fruit, and there is vegetables, and there is things to share. So this is my experience with gardening. You plant things, you're gonna get way more than you expected. And this is just life, like life. I believe I say this a lot from, it's a quote, and they say, if you set your intention to serve, you will serve beyond your wildest dreams. They also state somewhere something about, as you serve, you will receive tenfold, a hundredfold. It's just a matter of sort of time and understanding what true blessings and abundance is. But with that, I just wanted to state how when you plant a garden, you will get enough abundance to feed yourself, and you will have abundance to share. I always end up having way too much food, and I don't want it to be spoiled, and I can't eat it all, so I am seeking to give it away usually. Work, friends, just anybody who will take it. Which leads me to another thought of when you have that fruit and you have that abundance, what you'll notice is that, yeah, you've gotten way more than you were sort of expecting in terms of way more fruit and vegetables to share with others. Well, I think this has something to do with hoarding your service, right? What I find is if you don't go out and attempt to share that food with others and you're not able to eat it in time, it just goes rotten and it spoils and it goes moldy. And it might even, in the rot of that, it might actually cause rot to the other vegetables that you had saved for yourself to eat. So I think I just wanted to mention that, if you're not going out and sharing your abundance and sharing that, you have the possibility of holding on to something for too long and having it spoil. When I will tell you, it is way more gratifying to have given a bag of vegetables to somebody and see the smile on their face and the knowing that they're going to be eating some really healthy food that you grew with your love, versus all that love and intent somewhat being hoarded to yourself and then just rotting in your fridge or rotting in the garden. It's not a really nice feeling. So I think it's just important that when you do plant that fruit, you're planting it in hopes of the abundance of being able to share that. And then let's go even one step further than that with abundance of service. You planted this one little baby seed, which is almost like nothing. It just can sit on the pinky finger of your finger, and it has grown into this wonderful, massive plant, which now has the ability to create, hundreds or thousands of seeds. It's insane. The plants that I grow, the seed growth output is just astounding. You plant one seed, you probably get like 500. And I would suggest that that's somewhat the nature of service. You go out there to serve, to do well, and, some seemingly good things may happen to you. It's not that that's the reason why you do them. It's just the nature of the universe. Karma is real. If you're going out, creating good karma, well, life is nice. Still have those moments of suffering and whatnot, but that's okay. You're aware of the winter times and the summer times, and it's not always good times to plant gardens, but you are aware that you have the ability to grow a garden, and you choose to do that, and you don't just focus on the winter times of, growing gardens is impossible. I can't grow a garden. But, you have to have that faith and knowledge to know when is the good time to plant, keep the focus on it, and tending to it, giving it the attention, care that it needs, and the abundance will be provided, the fruit will be given, and many gifts can be shared. And I guess that's basically it. Other than just a quick little one, I don't know, I just kind of like to add like these weird, like Earth conspiracy type things to it. So here's something that I kind of also liked about the weeds. Okay, here's something I notice about weeds versus regular plants. Most regular plants grow at a somewhat steady rate. I don't know how to explain it better than that. They're just somewhat slow, if you will, in growing. A weed grows fast. A weed grows big. A weed is greedy. I don't know. I very much see a weed like a service to self entity and somewhat other plant like a service to others entity. Not in that. Well, they're both creator, right? We are all creators, so I'm not trying to differentiate too hard, but I notice things like that. I think of like a big corporation or some big powerful person. They can't help but expose themselves. They can't help but become so large and massive that you can see this obvious weed in the garden. And so you pull that weed. Man, I hope we pull some weeds in our garden, in our collective garden. So, you guys, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, I would really appreciate if you can support me somehow, to whatever degree you can. So go to theoneinfinitecreator.com and you can scroll down. I have a support section. That is the same website where I have links to all this LL research material. If you can give me a like, share, subscribe. I am like 2 to 3 subscribers away from 1,000 subscribers. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate the support in this podcast. It was a new venture for me, and if you listen to my first ones versus now, you can tell I'm a lot less nervous, and I think I've somewhat am starting to step into this role a little better in expressing myself. And yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for your support and sticking along with me here. And I will just lastly mention, because obviously this was going to happen, I looking out my window right now and I see some birds on the trees eating the bugs, and I don't know, it's just a nice way to end this, since we talked about the second density entities being aware of the service. Maybe they're aware that I'm telling you guys all about this and reflecting on this internally. So thank you guys. I love you. Take care.